Welcome back to Sipping on Wellness. Whether you're out for a walk, driving down the road, or enjoying a quiet moment with your favorite drink, I'm glad you're here. One of the things I find most interesting about health is that our bodies are constantly communicating with us. The challenge is that most of us were never taught how to listen. A mid-afternoon energy crash, the desire for something sweet after dinner, feeling energized after one meal and sluggish after another, waking up refreshed one morning and exhausted the next. We often think of these experiences as random. We chalk them up to getting older, having a busy schedule, or simply being tired. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes those experiences are clues that the body is responding to something happening beneath the surface. Over the last few years, one of the areas that's received a lot of attention is blood sugar. Not just for people with diabetes, but for people who want to better understand their energy, cravings, focus, and overall metabolic health. That's one of the reasons continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs, have become so popular. For the first time, people can watch how their blood sugar responds throughout the day and begin connecting those patterns to how they actually feel. And I think that's something worth paying attention to. Not because I think everyone needs to wear a device, but because it reminds us of something important. The body is always giving feedback. The more we understand that feedback, the better equipped we are to work with our bodies instead of constantly feeling confused by them. Today's episode isn't really about technology. It's about awareness. It's about understanding why your energy may feel steady on some days and unpredictable on others, what blood sugar can teach us about the way our bodies work, and why those lessons matter whether you wear a CGM or not. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, I'm not your doctor, and this podcast isn't intended to diagnose, treat, or replace individualized medical care. My goal is to share research, education, and practical insights to help you better understand your health and ask informed questions. As always, before making changes to your nutrition, supplements, medications, or healthcare plan, please consult with a qualified healthcare provider or practitioner who knows your individual situation. Today, I want to explore why blood sugar matters even if you've never been told you have a blood sugar problem, what CGMs are teaching us about energy, and a few practical lessons you can apply whether you wear one or not. When most people hear the term blood sugar, they immediately think about diabetes. And that's understandable because blood sugar is often discussed in that context. But one of the things we've learned over the last several years is that blood sugar influences much more than whether someone develops diabetes. It can affect how we feel throughout the day, how steady our energy is, how hungry we become between meals, and even the types of foods we crave. Think about a day when you felt focused, energized, and satisfied after meals. Compare that to a day when you felt tired, hungry every couple hours, and found yourself reaching for something sweet by mid-afternoon. There are many factors that contribute to those experiences, but blood sugar is often one of them. That's because our bodies are constantly working to keep blood sugar within a relatively stable range. When that process is working well, energy tends to feel more consistent. Hunger is often more predictable. Focus may feel sharper, and we may find it easier to go between meals without constantly thinking about food. When blood sugar becomes more erratic, however, we may notice very different signals. Energy can feel like a roller coaster. Cravings become stronger. Hunger may show up sooner than expected. Some people even notice changes in mood, concentration, or productivity throughout the day. Now, I want to be careful here. The goal isn't to obsess over every rise and fall in blood sugar. Our bodies are designed to handle changes in blood sugar. That's totally normal, and it's healthy. The goal is simply to become aware of patterns, because once we begin paying attention, we often discover that certain foods, habits, and daily routines leave us feeling very different than others. And that's where I think this conversation becomes interesting. Not because we need perfect blood sugar, but because understanding how our bodies respond gives us an opportunity to make more informed choices. And that's exactly what tools like CGMs are helping people see. One of the reasons I find CGMs so fascinating is that they often challenge what people think they know about their bodies. For years, we've relied largely on assumptions. We assume a particular breakfast gives us energy or a snack is keeping us satisfied. We assume a healthy meal affects everyone the same way. Then people put on a CGM and sometimes discover a very different story. One of the biggest lessons has been that individual responses matter. Two people can eat the exact same meal and have very different blood sugar responses. One person may feel energized and satisfied for hours, while another feels hungry again much sooner. That's one of the reasons nutrition can feel so confusing. Our bodies share many similarities, but they aren't identical. Another interesting lesson is that foods we think of as healthy don't always create the response we expect. That doesn't mean the food is bad. It simply means context matters. For example, some people discover that a breakfast built primarily around carbohydrates leaves them feeling hungry only a few hours later, while adding more protein, healthy fats, or fiber creates steadier energy throughout the morning. Others notice that certain foods they eat regularly affect them differently than they realized. What I find especially interesting is that food isn't the only factor influencing blood sugar. Things like sleep, stress, and movement all matter as well. In fact, many people are surprised to learn that a poor night's sleep or a particularly stressful day can affect blood sugar regulation, even when their meals stay exactly the same. That's a powerful reminder that the body doesn't operate in isolated systems. Everything is connected. I've also seen people become fascinated by how simple movement influences blood sugar. Something as basic as a short walk after a meal can create a noticeably different response compared to sitting for the next hour. Again, none of this means we need to become obsessed with every number. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people can make. The value isn't staring at a graph all day. The value is in the learning and recognizing patterns. It's in discovering that your body may be giving you feedback you've never noticed before. And that's the greatest lesson CGMs offer. Not perfect control, greater awareness. Because awareness is often the first step toward making changes that actually work for your body rather than someone else's. One of the reasons I wanted to do this episode is because I think it's easier to hear conversations about blood sugar and assume they're only relevant if you have diabetes or have been told you're pre-diabetic. But that's not really the takeaway. The bigger lesson is that our bodies are constantly responding to the choices we make throughout the day, and those responses often influence how we feel more than we realize. For example, if you're someone who regularly experiences an afternoon energy crash, one of the first places I might look isn't your caffeine take. I'd be curious about what happened earlier in the day. What did breakfast look like? Did you eat enough protein? Have you been sitting for most of the day? How was your sleep the night before? What's your stress level been like this week? Those questions may seem unrelated, but they often provide valuable clues. What I find most interesting is that many of the lessons people learn from wearing a CGM bring them back to the same foundational habits we talk about all the time: eating adequate protein, including fiber-rich foods, moving throughout the day, prioritizing sleep, managing stress. None of those things are particularly exciting, and they certainly aren't new. We talk about these all the time on this podcast, yet they continue to show up because they influence so many aspects of health, including how stable our energy feels from one day to the next. That's one of the reasons I don't think the biggest value of a CGM is the technology itself. The biggest value is what it teaches us. It gives people a chance to connect cause and effect in real time. They begin seeing how a poor night's sleep affects them the next day. They notice how different meals leave them feeling. They recognize that a short walk after dinner may influence their energy differently than spending the evening on the couch. And once you begin seeing those patterns, it's hard to unsee them. Whether you ever wear a CGM or not, I think learning your body's patterns is the real opportunity. You become a student of your own body. Learn to pay attention and get curious. The more we understand how our bodies respond, the better equipped we are to make choices that support the energy, focus, and health we're looking for. As I was preparing this episode, I kept coming back to the idea that awareness is a gift, not just in health, but in life. So often we move through our days on autopilot. We rush from one responsibility to the next, reacting to how we feel without ever stopping to ask why we feel that way. We get used to being tired. We get used to feeling stressed. We get used to the afternoon energy crash, the cravings, the poor sleep, or the constant feeling that something is just a little off. Eventually, those experiences begin to feel normal. but what if they're actually invitations to pay attention? One of the things I appreciate about tools like CGMs is that they encourage curiosity. They remind us that our bodies are constantly providing feedback and that there may be value in slowing down long enough to notice it. In many ways, I think faith invites us into a similar posture. Throughout Scripture, we see God calling people to pay attention to His voice, pay attention to His provision, pay attention to what He's doing in their lives and in the world around them. The problem is that paying attention requires us to slow down. It requires us to become observant rather than reactive. And that's not always easy in a culture that encourages us to move faster, do more, and constantly look for the next thing. As I think about health, I wonder how often the body is telling us something we've simply become too busy to notice. Maybe it's asking for more rest. Maybe it's asking for more nourishment. Maybe it's responding to stress we've been carrying for far too long. Maybe it's simply asking us to listen. That doesn't mean every symptom has a simple answer or that every health challenge can be solved by paying attention. But I do think there's wisdom in becoming a student of the body God gave us, not out of fear, not out of obsession, but out of stewardship. Because the more aware we become, the better equipped we are to care for ourselves in ways that support the life God has called us to live. And perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons hidden within this entire conversation. Our bodies are constantly communicating. The question is whether we're willing to listen. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to return to the idea we started with. Our bodies are constantly communicating with us, sometimes through our energy, sometimes through our hunger and cravings, sometimes through our sleep, stress, focus, or even recovery. The challenge isn't that the feedback isn't there. The challenge is that many of us have never learned how to recognize it. That's one of the reasons I find tools like CGM so interesting. Not because I think everyone needs one, but because they help make the invisible visible. They give people an opportunity to connect what they're experiencing with what may be happening beneath the surface. Most importantly, they remind us that awareness matters. The more we understand how our bodies respond to food, movement, sleep, and stress, the better equipped we are to make choices that support the energy and health we're looking for. I think that's the biggest takeaway from today's episode. Not that you need a device, not that you need to track every number, but that there is value in paying attention. Because when we become students of our own bodies, we often discover that the clues we've been looking for were there all along. If you'd like help building the foundations that support healthy energy, metabolism, and blood sugar regulation, I've linked my free What I'd Start With guide in the show notes, along with some of my favorite resources. And if you take one thing away from today's conversation, let it be this. Your body is always giving feedback. Learning to listen may be one of the most valuable health skills you ever develop. So until next time, friend, stay nourished, stay curious, and choose wellness one thoughtful step at a time.